I'm so excited because I'm going to start sharing really great things I've learned from awesome people over the years. Some of them are great friends of mine. Others are, I feel like they're my friends. Some of them don't actually know I exist, but I feel like I know them because I listen to their podcast or I read their books and their articles. And so I feel like we're friends. I get how creepy that sounds now that I'm saying it out loud, but you get what I mean. You get it. Okay, I decided to start things off with the 5 things that I learned from James Altucher. So James Altucher is a very fascinating human being. I just find him to be quite interesting. And while I don't know if he would call me his friend, I call him my friend. Actually, we did have an opportunity to meet and have dinner one night, and it was so much fun. He is such a kind person, and I won't even go into the whole story about how it happened, but it was just very nice of him to make the time to have dinner with a friend of mine and I that evening, and it was super fun. I loved meeting him in person. Isn't it so great when you get to meet someone in person after you've followed them online and you listen to their podcast or read their books? You feel like you know them, and then you get to meet them, and they're just as cool in person. I love that so much. So that was the experience I got to have with James. He is super cool and super fascinating, and so I'm excited to share the 5 things that I've learned from him over the years. Number 1, 10 ideas a day. 10 ideas a day. He's kind of known for this because he talks about how important it is to write every day and to come up with these ideas. And his big thing is just come up with 10 ideas. They don't have to be good ideas. In fact, it's great if they're bad ideas because you're getting them out and you're kind of strengthening your creativity muscle. And this is something that, not all of us do. We don't all spend time really being creative and thinking through stuff. And so he does things like he'll create a list of maybe it's 10 new business ideas, or hey, maybe it's 10 things to do with your kids. Whatever the case, just coming up with different lists of 10 different ideas every day, that's going to help you just be more creative. I love this too because it gets you out of perfectionism mode and it just gets you into, hey, I just have to come up with 10 ideas. I'm not trying to come up with good ideas. I'm kind of just trying to come up with ideas in general. And some of those ideas will be good. Some of them will probably suck, but that's okay because guess what? You come up with 10 more the next day. And some of them will work and some of them won't. So I love this idea of 10 ideas a day just to continue to keep that creativity muscle going. Number 2, Imposter syndrome is real. It's a thing, guys. And the reason why I say that is because I am so fascinated by the fact that James Altucher, this incredibly successful entrepreneur who has done very well for himself, he will still talk about how he feels vulnerable and how he feels he gets that imposter syndrome. He feels really nervous before he interviews some of the incredible people that he has on the podcast. In fact, he has said on the show that sometimes he kind of wishes that they're going to cancel so that he doesn't have to do them because he gets so nervous about it. And so I find it really interesting when some of the people that we really look up to, they are vulnerable enough to tell us that they feel that way too. Even though we see some of these people as super successful and they've achieved so much, we all can get stuck in that imposter syndrome and those feelings of insecurity and those feelings like, oh my gosh, is it going to be good enough or am I good enough? And so I love that he is open enough to share this with his listeners, especially because, again, he's an incredibly successful entrepreneur and he's done so much in his life, helped so many people. He has a huge podcast with massive following. So I find it really interesting that he still gets imposter syndrome. So don't feel bad if you get it too. We just got to work through it and move on. Number 3, choose yourself. That has to be in there, of course, because that's one of the books that he wrote. And it's really a theme for James. He talks all about how people need to choose themselves and do the work that they're meant to do. So he really believes that everyone has an opportunity to do work that they love, especially today. We have so many resources available to us. And if we have an idea, we can take action on it. We can try it. Talk about someone who tries things. James has tried tried and failed and tried again and been successful. He's been all over the map. And so I love this idea that he really encourages people to go after their dreams, to choose yourself, to not wait for someone to show up. You know, we can't wait for someone to show up and say, here is the thing that you want to do, here on a silver platter. We knew that you wanted to do it. We've got to get started on whatever work that we want to do. So whether it's a side passion project, whether it's starting a business, whether it's finding a new role, a new job, whatever the case, we need to choose ourselves, believe in ourselves, and go after it. So I love that that's James' real theme of so much around what he talks about. I find it so fascinating because he not only talks about it, but he's done it. He's lived it. He breathes it. It's awesome. So choose yourself. It's never too late to try something new. So one of the reasons why I think James is so fascinating is the fact that he does these crazy things. So he is not scared to try new things, or he's probably scared like all of us, but he does it anyway, which is amazing. So one of the things that he did a couple years ago was he gave everything away, just all of his stuff, and he decided to just Airbnb it. So for, I think it was like a year, maybe longer, where he was just going from Airbnb to Airbnb and living that way, just living out of a suitcase. In fact, he said that he had, I forget the number of items he had in his suitcase, maybe 18 items. And then if he wanted to buy something, he had to give something away so that he only kept that number of items, which, hey, I don't want to live that way. I don't even want to try that for a year. But I thought it was so fascinating that he did that. He learned a lot while he was doing it. And he just kind of said, hey, we're going to give this a try and see how it goes. I also love the fact that he started getting into comedy. So he really finds comedians fascinating, as do I. And so he decided, hey, I'm going to start getting up on stage and doing comedy. So he started doing that. Talk about scary, getting up on stage, having no experience writing jokes, and going in front of a crowd and trying to make them laugh. That to me is one of the scariest things. So props to James for actually doing it. In fact, he's so funny because he would do it on the subway. He would just start telling jokes on the subway. So I don't know how that all worked out, but maybe not so good, at least some nights. But I find it so interesting that he wanted to try something and he did it. And he's working at it. He's working at getting better, even if, again, I don't know. I've actually never seen him do stand-up, so maybe he's really good. But maybe he's not. So, but hey, getting better all the time, right? So I love the fact that he's trying different things, trying new things. You're never too young, too old, whatever the case. If you want to try something, go for it. Number 5, create more than you consume. So I talk about this a lot, actually, and I'm not really sure if I learned it from James, but I know that he definitely kind of reconfirms that thought, especially the way that he talks about how he consumes content. So he is very open about the fact that he's not really on social media. He's probably not going to answer you if you reach out to him. He also doesn't listen to podcasts. I mean, he's got an amazing podcast, but he doesn't really listen to podcasts. The only thing that he really consumes is books. He interviews some incredible authors, and he wants to prepare for those interviews, so he reads a ton of books, which is great. But he's not consuming a lot of social media. He's not getting caught up in that whole world. He knows that he needs to sit down and do the work that he needs to be doing, which is writing. So he writes every day. He's always sending out emails. He has a number of different books. So that's really the work that he does and that he knows is most important. And so I think for us in this social media consumption world, it's so easy for us to get caught up in consuming. What happens when we consume so much, that's when imposter syndrome takes place. That's when we start feeling that self-doubt and we look at what other people are doing and we think, oh my gosh, I should be in a different place, or look at how great their life is. You know, we get into that whole mess. So we can't bother with that. We've got to consume. We've got to stop consuming and we need to start creating. So what is the work that you know you need to do? Do that work first. Maybe stop listening to some podcasts or stop reading some of the blogs that you're reading if you're getting so caught up in your social media feed. So I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that consuming less and creating more is only going to help you in your business and in your life. So I love that he talks about that in the way that he does his work. He's so uber focused. And I think that if everyone was just a little bit more focused on the work that they were meant to be doing, there would be a lot more happiness and a lot more people doing what they love. All right, there you have it. 5 things that I've learned from James Altucher. I'm so appreciative of him. I'm so appreciative of his work, everything that he puts out into the world. I'm a huge fan of his. If you don't know him, you need to go check out the James Altucher Show. You will not be disappointed. He interviews some really incredible people. It's actually been really fun too, just to see the expansion of his podcast and the different guests that he's been getting over the years. And so I'm super proud of him. I love his work. I think he's making such an impact in the world. And so check him out, and I hope that you love him as much as I do.